Your child is crying. There is no book on the shelf. There is no app open on your phone. There is no voice on the other end of a phone line, waiting to reassure you that this is normal. For most of human history, this was simply how it was. No manuals, no expert advice, no anxious search at 3 in the morning for, is this normal? And yet, somehow, every single person who ever lived made it through childhood and grew up to raise more children of their own. How? The answer isn't that ancient parents were naturally better at this than you. The answer is that they were never doing it alone. For roughly 95% of human existence, people lived in small, mobile groups of hunter-gatherers. Anthropologist Richard Lee spent years living among the Jew/Hoansi San people of the Kalahari Desert in the 1960s, studying how they organized daily life. What he found wasn't a society obsessed with parenting techniques. It was a society where parenting wasn't really a separate category of life at all. It was just life, happening around children, with children folded into it. Picture a campfire at dusk, orange light flickering against the dark. A toddler wanders between adults, sometimes sitting with their mother, sometimes wandering to an aunt, sometimes ending up on the lap of an elder who isn't related to them by blood at all. Nobody redirects the child back to their parent. Nobody seems concerned. This is just how the evening goes. This is what anthropologists call alloparenting. Allo means other. Alloparenting simply means childcare shared among multiple adults, not just the biological mother and father. And it wasn't a backup system for emergencies. It was the default setting of human childhood for nearly all of our existence. Anthropologist Sarah Blaffer-Hrdy has spent decades studying this pattern across hunter-gatherer societies. Her research suggests that human babies evolved expecting multiple caregivers, not one overwhelmed parent, not two, many grandmothers, older siblings, aunts, uncles, family friends, all taking turns holding, feeding, soothing, and teaching. Why does this matter? Because human infants are unusually demanding. Compared to other primates, human babies are born more helpless and stay dependent for much longer. A single caregiver trying to meet all those needs alone, all day, every day, for years, would have been almost impossible to sustain in a world with no refrigeration, no running water, and constant physical labor just to find the next meal. So the species solved the problem differently. It spread the load. Think about what this actually looked like day to day. A mother gathering food might hand her infant to her own mother for an hour. An older sibling, maybe only 7 or 8 years old, might be tasked with watching a toddler while the adults worked nearby. This wasn't neglect, it was training. The older child was learning how to care for a younger one, the same way they would one day be cared for themselves when they became parents. There's a term for this too, cooperative breeding. It's a phrase usually used for birds and meerkats, species where multiple individuals help raise offspring that aren't their own. Humans, it turns out, are one of the very few primates that do this as well. Chimpanzees, our closest living relatives, don't really share infant care this way. Mothers carry and tend their babies almost entirely alone. Humans broke from that pattern, and that break may be one of the reasons our species was able to expand the way it did. But sharing the load wasn't the only difference. The environment itself was the curriculum. In a hunter-gatherer camp, there was no separate kid space and adult space. Children weren't shuttled off to a classroom to learn about the world in the abstract. They learned by being present. A child watching an adult sharpen a tool wasn't being taught a lesson. They were just nearby, absorbing it, the way you might absorb the layout of a kitchen you've spent your whole life in. Anthropologist James Suzman, who has spent years studying the Jew hoansi, has described how children in these communities are rarely given direct instructions or formal teaching. Instead, they're given enormous freedom to explore, imitate, and play, often unsupervised in ways that would seem unthinkable to many parents today. That last point is worth sitting with. Unsupervised. Not unsafe, but unsupervised in the sense we usually mean it. Multiple adults were around, scattered across the area, half watching without hovering. A child could wander 50 feet from the fire, climb something, fall, get back up, and no single adult would feel personally responsible for every second of that child's existence. The responsibility was ambient. It belonged to everyone, and no one specifically. Now, let's reconstruct a single afternoon. The sun is high. The camp is mostly quiet, the kind of quiet that comes from people resting during the hottest part of the day. A few adults are working in the shade, repairing tools, processing food. A group of children, ranging from about 4 to 11 years old, play together near the edge of camp. The oldest ones are essentially in charge, though no one assigned them that role. They settle a dispute over a toy. They decide what game to play next. A toddler tags along, mostly ignored except when they wander too close to the fire, at which point whichever adult is nearest simply redirects them without breaking conversation. There is no schedule, no tummy time, no flashcards, no worry about screen time, because there are no screens. The child's entire world is the camp, the people in it, and the land around it, and all three of those things are, in a sense, the lesson plan. Here's the counterintuitive twist. You might assume that more advice, more formal structure, more expert guidance would make parenting easier. But in many ways, the opposite happened. As human societies grew larger, settled down, and became more individualized, something was lost. The web of caregivers that had supported parents for hundreds of thousands of years began to thin out. This shift didn't happen overnight, and it didn't happen everywhere at once. But the long-term trend is visible. Smaller households, families living farther from extended relatives, parents, often just one or two of them, expected to provide not just food and safety, but also education, entertainment, emotional regulation, and constant supervision, often with very little outside help. In other words, the job of raising a child didn't get easier as societies advanced. In some ways, it got lonelier. The amount of advice available exploded. The number of hands available to actually help often shrank. This is the mirror. If you've ever felt like parenting today is harder than it should be, that you're somehow doing it wrong because you're exhausted, isolated, or constantly second-guessing yourself, consider this. You may not be doing anything wrong at all. You may simply be doing, alone or with one partner, a job that the human species spent hundreds of thousands of years designing to be done by many. That feeling of needing a village isn't a modern weakness. It's a memory. It's your biology recognizing that something is missing, because for nearly all of human history, that something was always there. None of this means ancient childhood was easy, or that every hunter-gatherer society handled things the same way, or that there's some perfect lost paradise we should try to recreate exactly. Infant mortality was high. Life was hard in ways most of us will never experience. But the social structure around children, the sheer number of people involved in raising any single child, was something modern life has largely engineered away, often without anyone deciding to do so on purpose. So the next time your child is crying, and there's no book on the shelf, and no app open, and no voice on the other end of the line, remember this. For most of human history, you wouldn't have been the only one listening. There would have been other ears, other arms, other laps, all within reach of that same fire. The advice didn't exist because it didn't need to. The help was already there.